Welcome. So the following video is about forcible entry through hinges. So we're going to talk about a few things here. The first thing we're going to tell you is that we don't recommend that you start forcible entry through the hinges. What we want to see is conventional forcible entry through ironwork at your lock side of the door. There are circumstances where you may need to try to force the door on the hinge side, and we'll talk about those. One of those may be significant locking mechanisms on this side of the door that you've been attempting to force and have been unsuccessful. So you can attempt to take the hinges. There are additional considerations that you need to have. One of those are any secondary locking mechanisms that are on this door are not going to be eliminated, such as drop bars, by taking the hinges. So again, this isn't your first line of attack for forcing the door, but we just want to give you some options and tools for your toolbox for forcible entry. So the techniques that we're going to talk about today are forcible entry through low security hinges. Okay, we're going to show you that technique. We're also going to talk about using our irons to get through higher security hinges, as well as cutting with K12s. So we'll go through all three techniques in this video. So what we have here are low security hinges, and you can determine that by the cap or button that you see on the top part of the hinge. This cap seals off the pin inside the hinge. The way we approach these is we take our Halligan, put it right beneath the cap, simply tap up, that'll pop the cap off. You then take the pick end of your Halligan to drive down the pin to remove from the hinge. You can flip the tool around now. You can just kind of tap it up a few times. So what we have here are higher security hinges, and you can tell this because they don't have any buttons or caps on the top of the hinge. You cannot remove the pin. The way we approach these is we use our Halligan to put the fork directly over the hinge with the purpose of trying to drive the hinge down to shear off the screws. So when we're taking these hinges, it's important that we go in the correct order. We want to make sure that we start with the lower hinges first and make sure we finish on this last upper hinge. The reason being, if you start up here, the door can kind of kick back and provide extra pressure on these hinges, which makes it harder to get out. So our technique for forcing these hinges, we're going to use our normal irons. What you're going to start with is putting the fork end of your Halligan right over the top of the lower hinge. You're then going to strike the top of the Halligan multiple times. The goal is to try to shear off the screws that go into the metal frame. You're not going to break through this hardened steel hinge. Again, the goal is just to be able to apply enough downward force that you break those actual bolts and then pull out the hinges. We'll give you an example of that. So when you put your Halligan, your forks down on top of this hinge, this is going to be a one-person operation at this point because I don't need to hold my hand here when someone's wailing a sledgehammer down on top of this adze. So you can just simply set the tool on top of the hinge. We're going to go ahead and apply strikes right down on top of the adze. So after the firefighter has applied significant downward strikes to the Halligan, they can then attempt to pull the hinge from the door. This can require a lot of force, and what you may find is that you hear popping sounds, which are the shearing of the screws in the frame. If you don't have success prying it off, you can put the Halligan back on the top of the hinge and add additional strikes to see if you can dislodge the hinge. After the bottom hinge is cleared, take your Halligan and start working on the middle hinge. For upper hinges, you can invert your Halligan, which will give you a better striking angle to try to reach the top hinge. You can also use a New York hook to increase your mechanical advantage. take the end and wrap it over the top edge of the fork. You're then going to put the bar behind the pick end of the Halligan to pry against it. This will drastically improve your mechanical advantage.
Look at that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So when we were doing this training, we noticed that we had quite a bit of difficulty forcing these top hinges. It wasn't due to the technique we were using to force these hinges, it was due to the hinge itself. We learned that these hinges have 90-degree bends which screw into the top part of the frame. When you have a hinge like this, it's going to be virtually impossible to force this hinge with irons. K12 will be your best option for this type of hinge. So we've discussed using forcible entry techniques with irons to get through both low security and higher security hinges. But based on our training that we had at this acquired structure, we found that the most effective way to get through hinges is still the use of the K12. It takes approximately 20 seconds to get through each hinge. Based on our efforts on many of these doors, this proved to be the most consistent way to get through the door quickly. Considering forcible entry through the hinge side should not be part of your initial plan. As we discussed earlier, you start forcible entry through your conventional lock side of the door. However, if you face a door that has formidable challenges on that lock side, the tactics we discussed in this video can be options to gain entry to the structure.